The morning air carried an unusual tension through the streets of Windsor. People had been gathering since dawn, their faces marked with concern and hope. News had spread quickly through social media and local communities that the Prince and Princess of Wales would be making a rare public appearance after weeks of absence from the public eye. Nobody knew exactly what to expect, but everyone felt that something significant was about to happen. Sarah Mitchell stood among the crowd, clutching her phone tightly. She had driven 3 hours from Manchester with her teenage daughter Emily, hoping to catch a glimpse of the royal couple. For Sarah, this was more than just curiosity. Her own battle with illness the previous year had made her feel a strange connection to Kate, who had been notably absent from royal duties. The uncertainty, the fear, the strength required to face each day. Sarah understood it all too well. "Mum, do you think they'll really come?" Emily asked, her voice barely audible above the murmur of hundreds of voices around them. Sarah squeezed her daughter's hand. "They'll come. They're stronger than people think." The crowd continued to swell as morning turned into late afternoon. Barriers had been set up along the pathway, and security personnel moved through the gathering with quiet efficiency. There were families with young children holding handmade signs with messages of support. Elderly couples who had followed the royal family for decades stood patiently, their eyes fixed on the distant entrance. Young people filmed everything on their phones, documenting what felt like a moment that would be remembered for years to come. Among the crowd was James Peterson, a retired teacher who had taught history for 40 years. He had seen royal visits before, countless ceremonies and celebrations, but this felt different. The atmosphere was thick with emotion, a collective holding of breath. People weren't here for spectacle or tradition alone. They were here because they cared, because somewhere in their hearts, they felt connected to these two people who represented something larger than themselves. "I remember when they got married," James said to the woman standing beside him, a stranger who somehow felt like an old friend in this shared moment. The joy in the streets that day. Everyone was so hopeful about their future. The woman nodded, her eyes glistening. "Life changes us all, doesn't it? But they've always seemed so devoted to each other. Whatever they're facing it together." A ripple of movement suddenly spread through the crowd. Security officers began speaking into their radios with more urgency. The moment was approaching. Sarah felt her heart rate quicken. She looked down at Emily, whose face had gone pale with anticipation. Then, in the distance, a dark vehicle appeared. The crowd's murmur rose to a steady hum of voices. Parents lifted children onto their shoulders. People pressed forward against the barriers, not aggressively, but with an eagerness that was almost reverent. Phones were raised, but many people simply stood with empty hands, wanting to witness this moment with their own eyes, unfiltered by screens. The vehicle slowed as it approached the designated area. Through the tinted windows, figures could be seen moving inside. Sarah realized she had been holding her breath. Around her, others stood frozen in anticipation. A young woman to her left had tears streaming down her face before anyone had even emerged from the car. The car door opened slowly. Everything seemed to happen in slow motion and lightning speed simultaneously. First, William stepped out, his face composed but showing the strain of recent months. He wore a simple dark suit, no elaborate royal regalia, just a man stepping into public view. His eyes scanned the crowd briefly before he turned back to the vehicle. Then Kate appeared, and the sound that emerged from the crowd was unlike anything Sarah had ever heard at a royal event. It wasn't cheering or celebration. It was something deeper, more primal. It was the sound of collective relief, of shared pain, of seeing someone you care about emerge from darkness. Gasps, sobs, and quiet exclamations rippled through hundreds of throats. Kate looked thinner than in her last public photographs, but she held herself with unmistakable grace. She wore a simple, elegant coat in deep blue, her hair pulled back softly. What struck everyone most was her smile, tentative but genuine, acknowledging the enormous effort it took to be standing there. William's hand immediately found hers, their fingers interlacing in a gesture so natural and protective that it spoke volumes about the journey they had been on together. Sarah felt tears on her own cheeks and didn't bother wiping them away. Beside her, Emily was crying openly, her young face marked with an emotion she probably couldn't fully name. All around them, the same scene repeated itself. Grown men brushed away tears. Elderly women clutched their hands to their chests. Parents hugged their children closer. "She's here," someone whispered behind Sarah. "She actually came." The couple began walking slowly along the barrier, and what happened next would be talked about for weeks to come. It wasn't a formal royal walkabout with practiced waves and polite distance. It was something far more human, far more raw. Kate reached out to touch the hands extended toward her, and in doing so, broke through decades of royal protocol. She wasn't just acknowledging her people, she was connecting with them on the most fundamental level. William stayed close by her side, his protective presence obvious to everyone watching. His eyes never strayed far from his wife, monitoring her strength, ready to support her if needed. The love between them was palpable, transforming what could have been a formal appearance into something intensely personal. As they drew closer to where Sarah and Emily stood, Sarah could see Kate's eyes more clearly. They held a mixture of gratitude, vulnerability, and quiet determination. These were eyes that had seen fear and chosen courage, eyes that had faced uncertainty and found purpose. When Kate's gaze briefly met Sarah's, something passed between them, a recognition of shared struggle, of battles fought in the quiet spaces of life, of strength discovered in unexpected places. The moment lasted only seconds, but Sarah knew she would carry it forever. The crowd pressed forward with gentle insistence as William and Kate continued their slow walk along the barrier. Each step seemed measured, deliberate, as if Kate was testing her own endurance while simultaneously drawing strength from the people around her. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds, casting long shadows across the gathered faces, illuminating tears that flowed freely without shame or embarrassment. Margaret Thompson had positioned herself near the middle section of the barriers, having arrived 5 hours earlier to secure her spot. At 78 years old, she had followed the royal family through triumph and tragedy, celebration and scandal. But nothing in her decades of royal watching had prepared her for the overwhelming emotion of this moment. Her arthritic hands gripped a small bouquet of white roses she had carefully chosen that morning, each bloom representing a prayer she had whispered for the princess's recovery. "Your Highness," Margaret called out as Kate approached, her voice cracking with emotion. "We've been praying for you every single day." Kate stopped, her composure wavering for just a moment. She reached out and took Margaret's weathered hand in both of hers. The touch lasted longer than protocol would typically allow, becoming less a royal gesture and more a human acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. Margaret later told reporters that she could feel the princess trembling slightly. The tremendous effort it took to be present overwhelming her careful composure. "Thank you," Kate said softly, her voice barely carrying over the emotional murmurs of the crowd. "Your prayers mean everything." William stood close behind his wife, his hand gently resting on the small of her back. The protective gesture didn't go unnoticed. People in the crowd exchanged glances, their hearts breaking and healing simultaneously at the visible devotion between the couple. This wasn't the formal distance often maintained by senior royals. This was raw, unfiltered love displayed in the most public setting imaginable. 20 feet away, David Chen captured photographs on his professional camera. He had been hired by a local news outlet to document the appearance, but as he clicked through shots, he realized he was photographing something far more significant than a routine royal engagement. Through his lens, he saw William's eyes constantly checking on Kate, the way his body angled protectively toward her, how his expression shifted between pride in her courage and concern for her well-being. One image in particular would later become iconic. Kate had paused to accept a drawing from a young girl, no more than 6 years old, who had pushed through the crowd with her father's encouragement. The child's artwork showed 2 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow, with the words "Get well soon, Princess Kate," written in uneven letters across the top. As Kate knelt down to the child's level, ignoring the strain such a movement must have caused, her eyes filled with tears. The little girl, confused by the adult emotions swirling around her, simply threw her arms around Kate's neck in a spontaneous hug. The crowd erupted. Not in cheers, but in a collective sob of recognition. Here was a mother, a wife, a woman facing her own mortality, finding strength in the innocent love of a child. William stepped forward, his own eyes glistening, and gently helped Kate stand. She clutched the drawing to her chest as if it were the most precious gift she had ever received. "What's your name, sweetheart?" Kate asked, her voice steadier now. "Lily," the child responded, suddenly shy in the presence of so many adults watching. "Lily, this is beautiful. I'm going to treasure it always." The girl's father, a construction worker named Tom Williams who had taken the day off work to bring his daughter, struggled to contain his own emotions. He had explained to Lily that morning why they needed to be there, why showing support mattered, though he wasn't sure a 6-year-old could truly understand. Now, watching his daughter embrace the princess with such pure, uncomplicated love, he understood that children sometimes grasp the most important things instinctively. As William and Kate moved further along the line, stories repeated themselves with variations. An elderly man presented Kate with a medal his late wife had received for charity work, saying she would have wanted the princess to have it. A teenage girl shared that Kate's strength had inspired her through her own health battle. A young mother with a baby in her arms simply said, "You're not alone," and Kate's composure finally cracked completely. Tears streamed down the princess's face as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. William pulled her close, whispering something in her ear that made her smile through the tears. The intimacy of the moment, played out before hundreds of witnesses, somehow felt both voyeuristic and sacred. People weren't just watching their future king and queen. They were watching two people deeply in love, supporting each other through circumstances that would test anyone's resolve. Security personnel exchanged concerned glances, wondering if the emotional intensity might become too much. But Kate seemed to draw energy from the connections she was making. Each hand she held, each story she heard, each tear she shared seemed to strengthen rather than deplete her. William remained vigilant, ready to intervene if necessary, but also clearly proud of his wife's resilience. Near the end of the barrier line, a group of nurses from the local hospital stood together in their uniforms. They had come straight from their shifts, unable to miss this opportunity. When Kate reached them, something shifted in her expression. Recognition, gratitude, and a deeper understanding passed across her face. These were the people who understood her journey in ways others couldn't. These were the hands that had cared for countless patients facing similar battles. "Thank you," Kate said to them, her voice stronger now. "Thank you for everything you do, for everyone you help." One nurse, a woman named Patricia who had worked in oncology for 20 years, stepped forward. "You're one of us now," she said simply, "and we take care of our own." The words hung in the air, profound in their simplicity. Kate nodded, understanding the unspoken meaning. She was part of a community now, bound by experience and survival, by facing fear and choosing hope. The royal titles, the protocol, the centuries of tradition, none of it mattered as much as this fundamental human connection. As the couple neared the end of their walkabout, the crowd's energy shifted again. The initial shock and emotion began settling into something else, while we saw admiration, respect, and a deeper love than before. These people had witnessed something extraordinary. Not a princess performing royal duties, but a woman showing them what courage truly looked like. Not a future king executing protocol, but a husband demonstrating what devotion meant in its purest form. Sarah Mitchell, still standing where she had been for hours, watched them prepare to leave. She thought about her own journey through illness, the fear and uncertainty, the moments when giving up seemed easier than continuing. Seeing Kate here, vulnerable yet strong, had somehow validated every difficult day Sarah had endured. If a princess could face her fears publicly, could show the world her vulnerability and still stand tall, then perhaps Sarah's own struggles had meaning too. As William and Kate turned to walk back toward the entrance of the historic building behind them, neither made any move to rush. The scheduled appearance was meant to last 30 minutes, but nearly an hour had passed, and still they remained. Security advisors whispered urgently into their radios, but William simply shook his head, a silent communication that they would leave when Kate was ready, not a moment before. The couple paused at the entrance steps, and in an unexpected gesture, they turned back to face the crowd one final time. William's arm wrapped around Kate's waist, pulling her close to his side. She leaned into him, allowing herself a moment of support, her head briefly resting against his shoulder. The gesture was so natural, so unrehearsed, that it felt like witnessing something deeply private despite the hundreds of witnesses. From the crowd, someone started clapping. Then another person joined in, and another, until the sound rolled through the gathered masses like thunder. But it wasn't the polite applause of royal tradition. It was the kind of applause that comes from the heart, that carries emotion in every clap, that says more than words ever could. People were applauding courage, love, resilience, and the simple act of showing up when it would have been easier to hide away. Kate lifted her free hand in a small wave, her smile wider now, more natural. The fear that had been visible in her eyes when she first emerged from the car had transformed into something else, gratitude, connection, and perhaps the beginning of healing. She mouthed the words "thank you" repeatedly as her eyes swept across the crowd, trying to make contact with as many faces as possible. Inside the building, preparations had been made for a brief private meeting with a small group of charity representatives. These organizations focused on medical research and patient support, causes that had always been close to Kate's heart, but now held even deeper personal meaning. As William and Kate entered the ornate reception room, the carefully maintained composure they had shown outside began to slip away. Elizabeth Warner, director of a cancer research charity, had been chosen to speak on behalf of the group. She had rehearsed her remarks carefully, wanting to strike the right balance between formal respect and genuine warmth. But when Kate walked into the room, all prepared speeches evaporated from Elizabeth's mind. The princess looked exhausted, the hour outside having drained reserves that were already depleted, yet her eyes still held that remarkable light, that determination to connect and contribute despite personal struggle. "Your Royal Highness," Elizabeth began, then stopped. "I'm sorry, but I have to say this. What you just did out there was showing yourself, sharing your vulnerability. You've given hope to thousands of people who are fighting their own battles. That matters more than any donation or patronage ever could." Kate's eyes filled with tears again, though she had surely thought she had no more left to cry. "I needed to be here," she said quietly. "For myself as much as for anyone else." Staying hidden felt like letting the fear win. William stood beside his wife, his hand never leaving hers. The representatives in the room watched as he guided her gently to a chair, ensuring she was comfortable before taking his own seat. The love between them was palpable, making some in the room uncomfortable with its intensity while simultaneously making others wish they could find such devotion in their own lives. The meeting proceeded, but it was unlike any royal engagement these charity workers had experienced. Kate asked questions that revealed deep personal understanding. She spoke about fear in ways that only someone who had felt it could articulate. She talked about the loneliness of facing medical uncertainty, about the guilt of worrying loved ones, about the strange disconnect between how you feel inside and how you're expected to appear outside. There were mornings, Kate admitted, her voice barely above a whisper, when I wasn't sure I could face another day of treatment, another round of tests, another conversation about outcomes and percentages. William would sit with me. She glanced at her husband, her love for him evident in every feature. He would just sit there, not trying to fix anything or tell me it would be okay. Just being there. Sometimes that's all anyone needs. William's jaw tightened, emotion clearly threatening to overwhelm him. Throughout Kate's health crisis, he had maintained an image of strength for her, for their children, for the public. But in this moment, the cost of that strength showed clearly on his face. He was tired, worried, and deeply affected by watching someone he loved suffer. Yet here he remained, solid as stone, ready to be whatever Kate needed him to be. Dr. Michael Foster, a research oncologist who had been invited to discuss recent treatment advances, found himself moved beyond his professional detachment. In his 30 years of medicine, he had seen countless patients and families navigate the nightmare of serious illness. But watching the future Queen of England speak with such honesty about her experience struck something deep within him. "Your Highness," he said carefully, "if I may say so, what you're doing right now, speaking openly about your experience, this will change lives. Not just by raising awareness, but by showing people it's okay to admit when they're struggling. So many patients try to be brave all the time, wearing masks for their families, their friends. They think that's what strength looks like. But real strength looks like this. Like honesty." Kate nodded slowly, absorbing his words. "I've learned that pretending to be fine when you're not doesn't protect anyone. It just makes you feel more alone." She paused, seeming to gather her thoughts. "When they first told me the diagnosis, I thought I had to handle it perfectly, to show everyone how brave I could be. But then I realized that my children needed to see their mother being human, being real. They needed to know that fear is natural, that asking for help is strong, not weak." The mention of her children brought a visible change in Kate's expression. Love and concern warred across her features. One of the charity representatives, a woman named Helen who had lost her own mother to cancer as a child, understood immediately what Kate wasn't saying. The hardest part of any parent's illness is not their own suffering, but knowing what their children are going through. How did you explain it to them? Helen asked, gently, speaking from her own childhood experience. What did you tell them? William and Kate exchanged a look, the entire conversation happening in that silent glance. When Kate spoke, her voice was thick with emotion. We told them the truth in age-appropriate ways. We told them that Mummy was sick, that the doctors were helping her get better, and that some days would be harder than others. We told them it was okay to feel scared or sad or angry. And we told them, William added, his voice rough, that no matter what happened, no matter how difficult things got, our family was strong enough to face it together. That love doesn't disappear when things get hard. It just becomes more important. The room fell silent, everyone present recognizing they were witnessing something profound. This wasn't a polished PR statement or a carefully managed image. This was two people who had walked through fire together and emerged changed, scarred perhaps, but unbroken. They were sharing their story not for sympathy or admiration, but because they understood that vulnerability creates connection, and connection creates healing. As the private meeting drew to a close, each representative personally thanked William and Kate. Many shared their own stories of loved ones lost, battles fought, hope maintained against overwhelming odds. Kate listened to each story with complete attention, often clasping hands, occasionally embracing people who moments before had been strangers. When it was finally time to leave, Kate stood slowly, the exhaustion evident in every movement. William immediately moved to her side, offering support she gratefully accepted. As they walked toward the exit, Kate turned back one last time to the group who had shared such intimate moments with them. "Thank you," she said simply, "for reminding me why this matters, for reminding me that I'm not alone." Outside, the crowd had not dispersed. If anything, more people had arrived, drawn by social media posts and news alerts showing the emotional scenes from earlier. Police estimated nearly 2,000 people now lined the streets, all hoping for one more glimpse of the couple who had touched so many hearts that afternoon. The atmosphere had shifted from the intense emotion of the earlier encounter to something more celebratory, as if everyone present understood they had witnessed history being made. When William and Kate emerged from the building, the reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted alongside fresh tears. People called out messages of love and support. Children waved flags hastily purchased from street vendors who had appeared as crowds grew. The sound washed over the couple like a wave, and for a moment Kate stopped walking, simply standing still and absorbing the outpouring of affection. "Can you believe this?" she said quietly to William, her voice full of wonder. "All these people." William smiled, though his eyes remained vigilant, constantly monitoring his wife's energy levels. "They love you," he said simply. "They always have, but now they understand you in a different way. You've let them see your humanity, and it's the greatest gift you could give them." Security had arranged for the car to pull up directly at the building's entrance, allowing for a quick departure. But once again, William and Kate made their own decision. Instead of immediately getting into the vehicle, they walked toward the barriers again, drawn by the energy and love emanating from the crowd. This time, the interactions had a different quality. People still cried, still reached out desperately to touch Kate's hand, but there was also joy now, relief, even moments of laughter. A teenage boy showed Kate a video on his phone of his younger sister watching the live broadcast from her hospital bed, the little girl waving at the screen with a smile despite the IV tubes attached to her arm. Kate watched the entire clip, her hand pressed to her chest. "Tell your sister she's incredibly brave," Kate said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Tell her I'm thinking of her." The boy nodded, unable to speak, and quickly sent a message to his family. Within seconds, his phone exploded with responses from relatives sharing the princess's message with his sister. The small gesture would become a treasured memory for that family, something they would talk about for generations. Further along the barrier, a group of women held a banner that read, "Strength isn't never falling apart. It's choosing to get back up." Kate stopped in front of them, reading the words several times. One of the women, recognizing the princess's reaction, spoke up. "We're all survivors," she said, gesturing to the women around her. "Different battles, different cancers, different journeys. But when we heard you were going to be here today, we knew we had to come." You're showing everyone what survival looks like. It's not perfect recovery and happy endings. It's showing up even when you're scared, even when you're tired, even when it would be easier to hide. Kate reached across the barrier and took the woman's hand. How long have you been in remission? 3 years. Still terrified every time I go for a checkup, but getting better at living with the fear. Does it get easier? Kate asked, and the vulnerability in her voice made it clear she wasn't asking as a princess seeking information, but as a fellow survivor seeking hope. It gets different, the woman replied honestly. You learn to carry it differently. Some days are harder than others, but you also learn to appreciate things you never noticed before. Small moments become precious. Love becomes more important, and you realize you're stronger than you ever thought possible. Kate nodded, absorbing these words like medicine. William stood close by, listening to the exchange, his expression a mixture of pain and pride. Watching Kate connect with these women, seeing her find solidarity and strength in their shared experience, he understood that this public appearance was as much about her healing as it was about inspiring others. An elderly gentleman near the back of the crowd called out in a wavering voice, "God bless you both." Kate turned toward the sound and, seeing the man's age and position, asked security to help bring him forward. When he reached the barrier, she could see he was crying, his weathered face wet with tears. "I lost my wife to cancer 40 years ago," he said, his voice breaking. "We didn't have the treatments they have now. She fought so hard, but it wasn't enough. Seeing you here today, seeing you surviving, or it helps somehow, makes me feel like maybe her fight wasn't in vain, that all the advances since then have mattered." Kate took both his hands in hers, and for a long moment they simply stood there, connected by loss and hope and the strange alchemy of human understanding. "I'm so sorry for your loss," she said, "and I promise you her fight mattered. Every person who faces this disease contributes to the understanding that might save the next person. She was part of that chain, and so am I." The man nodded, seeming to find peace in her words. As Kate moved on, he remained at the barrier, watching her with an expression of such profound gratitude that those nearby found themselves crying again. The sun was beginning to set, casting golden light across the scene. Kate's face was etched with exhaustion, but she continued moving along the barrier, unwilling to leave while people remained waiting to connect with her. William finally intervened gently, leaning close to whisper something in her ear. She nodded reluctantly, understanding that she had given everything she could for today. They made their way back to the waiting car, walking slowly, hands clasped tightly together. At the vehicle, William opened the door for Kate, but before she could enter, a young girl broke through the barrier. Security moved quickly, but William held up his hand, stopping them. The child, no more than 8 years old, held out a small teddy bear wearing a tiny crown. "This is Princess Bear," the girl said shyly. "She helped me when I was in the hospital. I want you to have her so she can help you too." Kate knelt down one final time, accepting the worn teddy bear with trembling hands. The toy clearly had been loved intensely, held during scary moments, clutched during treatments, a companion through a child's own medical journey. The gift was worth more than any jewel in the royal collection. "Princess Bear is perfect," Kate said, her voice thick with emotion. "I promise to take very good care of her. Thank you so much for sharing her with me." The child beamed, then surprised everyone by stepping forward and whispering something in Kate's ear. Whatever she said made Kate laugh through her tears, a genuine sound of joy that rippled through the crowd like a blessing. She hugged the child gently, then finally allowed William to help her into the car. As the vehicle pulled away, Kate pressed her hand against the window, Princess Bear clutched to her chest with her other arm. The crowd waved and cheered, many people crying openly now that the moment was ending. The car moved slowly through the streets, and people lined the route, some following on foot, others simply standing and waving as the couple passed. Inside the car, away from the cameras and crowds, Kate finally allowed herself to fully collapse into William's arms. The strength she had maintained for hours dissolved, and she shook with exhaustion and overwhelming emotion. William held her tightly, pressing kisses to her hair, murmuring words of comfort and pride. "You were magnificent," he whispered. "I've never been more proud of you than I am right now." "I couldn't have done it without you," Kate replied, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "Knowing you were right there beside me made all the difference." They rode in silence for a while, processing everything that had happened, everything they had felt, everything that had been shared. The teddy bear sat between them, a symbol of the connections forged that day, the love given and received, the hope that persists even in darkness. The car wound through the countryside as evening settled over England, the golden light fading to purple twilight. William and Kate sat close together in the back seat, the partition raised to give them privacy from their security detail. Kate had removed her shoes, tucking her feet beneath her, Princess Bear still cradled in her arms. The exhaustion was evident in every line of her body, but something else shone through as well. A sense of peace, of having completed something important. "Do you regret it?" William asked quietly, breaking the comfortable silence. Being so open? Sharing so much? Kate considered the question carefully, watching the familiar landscape roll past the window. "I was terrified," she admitted. "This morning, getting ready, I almost asked to cancel 3 different times. The thought of facing all those people, of them seeing me like this, not perfect, not polished, just exhausted and scared. It felt impossible, but you did it anyway. I did it because hiding felt worse than showing up, and because you were with me." She turned to look at him, her eyes soft with love. "You've been with me through every moment of this nightmare. Every treatment, every bad day, every 3 a.m. panic attack. If you could be strong enough to walk through all of that with me, I could be strong enough to walk down a line of barriers." William's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He had worked so hard to be strong for Kate, to never let her see his own fear and despair. But in private moments like this, the weight of the past months showed clearly. "There were times I didn't know if I was being strong or just pretending," he confessed. "Times when I wanted to rage at the unfairness of it all, to demand answers no one could give me. But then I'd look at you, fighting so hard, staying so brave, and I knew I had to match your courage. We matched each other," Kate corrected gently. "That's what partnership means. You held me up when I couldn't stand, and I gave you something to fight for. Neither of us could have done this alone." The car turned onto a private road, heading toward one of the royal residences where their children waited. Kate's expression shifted, a mixture of longing and anxiety crossing her face. She had been away from the children during several hospital stays, and every separation had been agony for both mother and children. They had visited when possible, video called daily, but nothing replaced physical presence and the reassurance of seeing your mother smile, hearing her laugh, feeling her arms around you. "They've been so brave," William said, reading her thoughts. "George keeps asking when things will be normal again. Charlotte writes you letters every day, even though she sees you. And Louisa," his voice caught. "Louis keeps bringing you his favorite toys, the ones that make him feel safe because he wants you to feel safe too." Kate wiped away tears, careful not to smudge what remained of her makeup. "I hate what this has put them through. They're so young. They shouldn't have to understand words like chemotherapy and prognosis." "No, they shouldn't," William agreed, "but they've learned other words too. Resilience, hope, the true meaning of family. When we look back on this years from now, Aurora, and we will look back, Kate, because you're going to be here to remember it with me, we'll see that this terrible thing also taught our children the most important lessons we could ever give them." The car pulled through the security gates, and Kate could see lights on in the windows of the residence. She knew her children would be waiting, probably with their faces pressed to the windows watching for the car. The thought made her smile despite her exhaustion. She needed to see them, to hold them, to reassure herself that they were okay, even as they reassured themselves that she was home. As the vehicle stopped, William squeezed Kate's hand. "Ready?" "Always when it comes to them." The front door burst open before they reached it, and 3 children came running out despite the staff's attempts to maintain order. George reached them first, at 11 years old, trying to be mature but unable to hide the relief in his eyes. Charlotte was crying before she reached Kate, her 9-year-old face crumpling with emotion. And Louis, at 7, simply launched himself at his mother with complete faith that she would catch him. Kate knelt down, gathering all 3 children into her arms, William kneeling beside her to complete the family circle. They stayed that way for a long moment, the children clinging to their mother, Kate breathing in the scent of their hair, feeling the solid reality of their small bodies pressed against her. This, she thought, was what she had fought for. Not duty or position or public image, but this exact moment, this chance to hold her children and know she would hold them again tomorrow and the day after that. "How was it, Mummy?" Charlotte asked, pulling back to search her mother's face. "Were people nice?" They were wonderful, darling. So loving and kind. They sent their love to you three as well. They know how strong you've been. George straightened his shoulders, clearly trying to live up to that praise. We were fine, Mum. We took care of each other just like you taught us. Kate stroked his cheek, seeing the young man he was becoming. I'm so proud of you. All of you. Louis held up a drawing he had been clutching. I made this for you today. It's our family, and everyone's smiling because you're home. The picture showed 5 stick figures holding hands, with a sun shining overhead and flowers scattered around their feet. It was simple and perfect. The world as a 7-year-old wished it to be, or his family together and happy, the darkness pushed away by love. Kate took the drawing with trembling hands, adding it to the growing collection of artwork that had become more precious to her than any official portrait. They moved inside as a unit, the children unwilling to let their mother out of their sight. Staff members smiled to see them, relief evident on every face. The entire household had been affected by Kate's illness, worrying and hoping and doing whatever small things they could to help. Seeing the family reunited, seeing the princess smiling despite her obvious exhaustion, felt like a collective exhale. Dinner was waiting in the private family dining room, a simple meal that Kate had requested specifically because it was the children's favorite. As they ate, the children filled the room with stories about their day, their activities, the small dramas of childhood that somehow seemed more precious now. Kate listened intently, laughing at their jokes, asking questions about their homework and their friends, being fully present in a way that felt almost sacred after the uncertainty of recent months. William watched his family, his heart so full it hurt. He had spent months terrified of losing Kate, imagining worst-case scenarios he couldn't bear to voice aloud, wondering how he would raise their children alone if the unthinkable happened. But here she was, tired and changed, but fundamentally herself, laughing at Louis's silly joke and reminding Charlotte to use her napkin. After dinner, they moved to the family room where a fire crackled in the hearth. The children piled onto the sofa with Kate, creating a nest of pillows and blankets. William sat nearby, Princess Bear in his lap now, watching as Kate read aloud from a chapter book they had been working through together. Her voice grew hoarse as exhaustion deepened, but she kept reading, unwilling to miss this moment of normalcy. When Charlotte's eyes began to droop, William suggested bedtime. The children protested half-heartedly, but it was clear they were tired. The emotional day had affected them too, even if they hadn't been present for the public appearance. They had felt their mother's nervousness that morning, had worried throughout the day despite reassurances, and now felt the relief of having her home safe. Kate tucked each child into bed personally, spending time in each room, answering questions, soothing fears, providing the comfort only a mother can give. In George's room, she found him trying hard not to cry. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "I was so scared today," he admitted, his voice small despite his growing height. "What if something had happened to you? What if you got too tired and got sick again? What if, oh..." Kate pulled him close, letting him cry against her shoulder. "I know you're scared. I'm scared too sometimes. But today was a good day, George. I showed myself that I'm getting stronger. I showed everyone who's been worried about me that I'm still here, still fighting, still loving you with everything I have. Promise you'll always come back," he whispered. "Promise you won't leave us?" It was a promise no one could truly make, and Kate knew it. But she also knew what her son needed to hear. "I promise I will fight with everything I have to stay with you. I promise that no matter what happens, my love for you will never change. And I promise that Daddy and I will always make sure you're taken care of, that you're safe, that you know how deeply you're loved." It wasn't the absolute guarantee George wanted, but it was truthful, and somehow that mattered more. He nodded against her shoulder, his breathing becoming steadier. By the time Kate left his room, he was nearly asleep, his face peaceful in the soft glow of his nightlight. After all 3 children were asleep, William found Kate standing at the window of their private sitting room, looking out at the moonlit gardens. She still held Princess Bear, her fingers absently stroking the worn fur. He came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and resting his chin on her shoulder. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Everything. Nothing. I keep replaying the day in my mind, all those faces, all those stories. That little girl who gave me this bear." She held up the toy. She went through her own medical trauma, Probably as scared as I've been. Maybe more so because she was so young, and she gave me the thing that helped her survive. I can't stop thinking about the generosity of that, the pure love in that gesture. William tightened his arms around her. You gave people something today, too. You gave them hope. You showed them that it's possible to be afraid and brave at the same time, to be weak and strong, to be struggling and surviving. Did I do the right thing? Kate asked, voicing the doubt that had been nagging at her. Being so public about something so personal? The children will grow up with this documented forever. People will always remember me as the princess who had cancer. Is that fair to them? To you? William gently turned her around to face him, his hands cupping her face tenderly. Listen to me, Kate. What you did today was one of the bravest things I've ever witnessed. Yes, it was personal. Yes, it was raw. But it was also real, and in a world that desperately needs authenticity, you gave people something genuine to hold on to. Our children will grow up knowing their mother faced something terrifying and handled it with grace. They'll be proud of you. I'm proud of you. Tears slipped down Kate's cheeks, but she was smiling now. We've been through something, haven't we? Changed by it in ways we're probably still discovering. We have. And we'll keep discovering for the rest of our lives. But we'll do it together, just like we've done everything else. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, drawing strength from each other's presence. Through the window, they could see security walking the grounds, life continuing its normal patterns around them. But nothing felt entirely normal anymore, and perhaps that was okay. Perhaps normal was overrated when compared to real, to honest, to deeply felt. Kate's phone buzzed on the nearby table. She picked it up and scrolled through hundreds of messages and emails that had come in since the appearance. Messages from friends, family, charities, complete strangers who had gotten her contact information somehow. All of them echoed the same themes. Thank you, we love you, you're not alone, you gave us hope. One email in particular caught her attention. It was from the teenage girl who had shown Kate the video of her little sister in the hospital. The girl had written, My sister watched the video of you talking to my brother at least 20 times tonight. She keeps saying the princess thinks, I'm brave. She's facing a surgery tomorrow that she's been terrified about, but tonight she's sleeping peacefully. You did that, thank you. Kate showed the message to William, fresh tears streaming down her face. This is why it mattered, she said. Not for the hundreds of people in the crowd, but for that one little girl facing surgery tomorrow who now believes she's brave because someone she admires said so, and for the cancer survivor who needed to hear that fear doesn't go away completely, William added, and for the elderly man grieving his wife, and for every person who's ever felt alone in their struggle. You showed them they're not alone. That connection, that's the real gift you gave today. Kate set the phone down and moved to the sofa, suddenly overwhelmed with exhaustion. William sat beside her, and she immediately curled into his side, her head resting on his chest. He stroked her hair gently, feeling the steady rhythm of her breathing begin to slow as sleep threatened to claim her. I keep thinking about what comes next, Kate murmured drowsily. More treatments, more checkups. Always wondering if it will come back. The fear never really leaves, does it? Probably not entirely, William answered honestly. But we'll carry it together. And we'll have good days that outnumber the bad days. We'll watch our children grow up. We'll have grandchildren someday. We'll have a lifetime of ordinary moments that feel extraordinary because we nearly lost them. Tell me about those ordinary moments, Kate requested, her eyes closing. Paint me a picture of the future. William's voice took on a dreamy quality as he spoke, describing scenes of family dinners and summer holidays, of George's graduation and Charlotte's wedding, of teaching Louis to drive and watching all three children become adults with families of their own. He described growing old together, sitting in this same room decades from now, remembering this terrible time as something they survived rather than something that defeated them. Kate listened, letting William's voice and vision of the future wrap around her like a blanket. This was what she was fighting for. Not just survival, but the chance to live all those ordinary, extraordinary moments, the chance to see her children grow, to grow old with the man she loved, to accumulate decades of memories and experiences and small daily joys. "We're going to make it, aren't we?" she whispered, already half asleep. "We're already making it," William replied. "Every day we wake up together, every smile we share, every moment we hold our children asleep, that's making it. Today was just one more day in a lifetime of days we're going to share." Kate's breathing deepened into sleep, and William continued to hold her, unwilling to disturb her rest even though his arm was going numb and his back was beginning to ache. He thought about the day, about watching Kate interact with the crowds, seeing her vulnerability transform into strength, witnessing the love between his wife and complete strangers who were connected by shared experience. He thought about the elderly man who had lost his wife 4 decades ago, still crying about it, still carrying that loss. William had been terrified of becoming that man, of spending the rest of his life grieving Kate, marked forever by her absence. But today had felt like a turning point, a moment where the possibility of loss began to be replaced by the reality of survival. The door opened quietly, and one of the staff members peeked in. Seeing Kate asleep and William's gesture for silence, they simply nodded and withdrew. The household had learned to accommodate these moments, understanding that sometimes the future king and queen needed to simply be William and Kate, a couple who had faced something terrible together and found their way through it. As the night deepened, William's thoughts turned to tomorrow and all the tomorrows after that. There would be more medical appointments, more moments of fear when test results came back, more days when the uncertainty felt overwhelming. But there would also be laughter and love, family dinners and bedtime stories, ordinary moments made precious by their hard-won nature. He looked down at Kate, peaceful in sleep, Princess Bear still clutched in her hand. The worn teddy bear from a brave little girl, a symbol of comfort given and received, of the human connections that sustain us through our darkest times. It would likely sit on Kate's bedside table from now on, a reminder of this day and everything it represented. Outside, the moon rose higher, casting silver light across the gardens. In their bedrooms, 3 children slept safely, their dreams free from worry for tonight at least. In cities and towns across the country, people who had witnessed the day's events were processing their own reactions, feeling changed by what they had seen, carrying forward the message that vulnerability and strength are not opposites but partners in the dance of survival. And in this quiet room, William held his wife and allowed himself to believe in the future they had described together. A future that had seemed impossible just months ago, but now felt within reach. Not guaranteed, and nothing ever was, but possible, and sometimes possibility was enough. As the clock struck midnight, marking the end of this extraordinary day, William carefully lifted Kate in his arms and carried her to their bedroom. She stirred slightly but didn't wake, trusting completely in his care. He tucked her into bed, placing Princess Bear on the pillow beside her, then climbed in himself, pulling her close once more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new fears to face, new moments to navigate. But tonight, they were together. They were surviving, and they were teaching their children and their country what it meant to face darkness with honesty, to admit fear while choosing courage, and to love each other through everything life could throw at them. The story of this day would be told and retold, photographed and written about, analyzed and remembered. But the real story wasn't the public appearance or the emotional crowd reactions. The real story was in moments like this. Oh. 2 people who loved each other, choosing to keep showing up for each other no matter what, promising through actions rather than words that they would face whatever came next together. And as sleep finally claimed William too, his last thought was a simple one. They were going to be okay. Not perfect, not unchanged, not unmarked by what they had been through, but okay, together. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.